Hello, my brothers and sisters. This is another reading from the man behind the curtain. I am going to read a small little article by Publius, and I'm going to talk about Trump's constitutional authority, which he does have authority. So I'm going to start out. It says, yes, Trump has the constitutional authority to secure our southern border, by Publius. Instead of reading our Constitution and seeing what it says, Americans get their legal advice from what everybody says. Like people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. Most attorneys and judges and lawyers that don't even really know the Constitution, they just make up their crap. Instead of reading our Constitution and seeing what it says, Americans get their legal advice from what everybody says. Now, they are hearing about emergency powers and are in a tailspin. Did Congress Emergency Power Act delegate to the President the powers to call whatever he wants an emergency and then do what he deems best? Our focus shouldn't be on what can be called an emergency, but does our Constitution authorize the federal government to do, if anything, with respect to the hot topic of the day? Let's look at immigration, in the context of the hordes of aliens storming through our southern border. What does our Constitution say about it? Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, delegated power over immigration to Congress. So Congress is to make the immigration laws, and the President, as chief executive, is to put Congress's laws into effect. Article 6, Section 4 requires the United States to protect each of the states against invasion. Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 15 and 16 authorizes the calling up of the militia for three purposes: to execute the laws of the Union, to suppress insurrections, and rebel invasion. Article 2, Section 3 authorizes the President to recommend to Congress such measures as he deems necessary and expedient, to convene Congress on extraordinary occasions and require him to take care that the laws be lawfully executed. That includes the immigration laws. Now, what Trump is finding that he has problems with is there's ridiculous laws that are just stupid laws and that doesn't benefit the United States. We had some prior authority delegated powers make laws that are actually in conflict with the actual law. So actually those laws that are on the books now that are aiding and abiding and helping the enemies come into the United States is actually void, bound, and null, and it is actually a crime if anybody obeys them and enforces them. But we got too many ignorant people that don't really know the law. So, however, Article 2, Section 2 provides that the President, in sync of the armed forces, he is sync of the militia when it is called into active service of the United States. As noted above, the militia may be called into active service to repel invasion. So Trump does have the authority, and Trump, I'm hoping he knows by now, as much as he's got notifications from a lot of guys like me, that he knows that any secondary law that's repugnant is in conflict, so it's not law and it should not be enforced. So I believe he's reversing a lot of those laws and a lot of the people that made them constitutional acts prior to him. He's actually using his authority of executive power under the branches of government, the executive authority, as the sword to reverse unconstitutional acts, which is well in his authority. That's actually his authority. That's his whole job, is to protect and enforce the law. And if the law is not actual law, and if the law is in conflict, then it's his job to make sure that the unconstitutional acts are not bound. It's that simple. So those So those are the constitutional provisions which apply to the invasion of our southern border. So you need to read the articles under the executive branch powers, and even in sister branches of authority delegated. There's only a total of 7 articles of 7, so read them all. I mean, and it's the law, so you should read it so you understand what's going on a little better, and maybe you can assist and save our nation if you're in a position to do so. America is finished if we don't control our southern border. Congress and the President have clear constitutional authority. Actually, they have the duty to control our southern border. That comes against, again, what I elaborated on the conflicts, and when it comes to repugnant and ridiculous, stupid laws that are in conflict that are not bound to anybody. But unfortunately, we have stupid people that are bound to it that don't realize the distinctive difference between conflict of a secondary law. But I'm praying and hoping Trump's figuring that out. What if Congress refuses to fund the wall? Must the President tell the American people, well, I tried, but my hands are tied. You better get ready for civil war. There's a good possibility civil war could occur, but I'm hoping it doesn't. I'm hoping behind the scenes we got a lot of guys like me and individuals working hard behind the scenes to submit the truth and bring out the truth and help those that are in power to see the light. Okay. So Article 5, Section 4 imposes on the United States the duty to protect each of the states against invasion. If Congress won't do it, the President must. He is Chief Executive of the United States. For him to refuse to act for the reason that Congress won't fund the wall would be as contemptible as the husband and father who refuses to get armed to protect his family because the government says he can't be armed. Well, we all know that's a crock. If you can't be armed, that would any laws that they make that says you can't be armed is repugnant and secondary, so that's void and no automatically. So the President may solicit donations from the American people for funds, labor, and construction materials to build a wall. So he has that choice if he wants to, under his authority. About calling up the militia to repel invasion, we no longer have the militia provided for at Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 15 and 16. During 1903, the American people and their federal and state legislators, who had all mainlined on progressivism, went along with the federalizing of the militia. This was done with the grossly unconstitutional Federal Dick Act of 1903. So that law that was enforced back then in 1903, this Dick Act that they're talking about, is repugnant. And unfortunately, that's part of the problems where it started. It says that unlawfully converted the militia into a National Guard, which is an adjunct of the federal military. If we still had the militia of the several states, it would be obvious that the militia must be and could be called into national service to repel the invasion coming through our southern border. It's that simple. But we have our National Guard to this day. Even though we have our National Guard and our standing armies, and and when I say this, I'm talking about all the components of executive authority, delegated power, police powers under the 10th Amendment. You're talking the police, all the components of the military, and even each individual, all the way back down to each individual of the United States of each state. They are actually part of the militia, and they can be called upon still to this day if a leader would summons the masses. And it could happen, and I'm sure it would happen if it was in need, but we have too many standing obstacles to protect. But since we no longer have the militia, we must rely on the closest thing to a militia we have left, the National Guard. Congress has passed a law which authorizes the President to call the National Guard into national service. When I get time, I'll allocate it and a link to it. But the President does the president has authority to call up the National Guard to protect our southern border and the construction workers while the wall is being built. But if push comes to shove, the president has declared duty to protect our southern border and to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and all sister states. Remember, the questions are always, what does the Constitution authorize? And what duties does the Constitution impose on the federal government? There is no substitute for reading the Constitution for yourself, article by article, and then seeing how the articles all work together. Hand in glove. It really was a 6,000-year miracle. Wow. So, I hope you enjoyed this quick read. I'm going to give a closer now. So based on this Publius article, and based on the articles, if you read them, that are in harmony, there's only 7 of them in the Constitution, and that's not even including all the articles that are in all the sister states' constitutions that are in harmony with the Supreme Constitution. So Trump does have authority, and we're at this point now, pretty much the majority of society knows that he has authority, and he's backed by a lot of individuals. So I will leave it at that, and I will say God bless you, I love you, and thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my reading from the man behind the curtain. Thank you.